So, here we are again. Christmas week. I don't know whether you've done your Christmas shopping yet, but you better get a move on because it might be too dangerous to go out soon.
Well, it might be, mightn't it? And then again, of course, it might not be.
It might not.
We're full of soft verbs: might, could, may.
Yeah.
All of which could be retranslated as might not, could not, and may not. And we just get this all the time now. And I have to say that the article by Fraser Nelson over the weekend on the Spectator website, in which he discusses with a modeler just exactly how modelling works, is extraordinarily eye-opening to anybody who's taken these predictions as if they were, how shall I put it, as if they were predictions rather than speculations, which is what they are. And then, of course, we have to add to that the other insoluble conundrum, one which will never now be uncovered, of exactly what the ultimate figures meant when deaths were counted. In what way were they deaths caused by COVID, particularly? And then this incessant rehearsal of supposed case numbers, case, a serious word to do with an actual outbreak of disease, being used instead to describe a positive test in someone who in many cases has no symptoms. Hospital admissions, again, everybody who goes into hospital is tested for COVID. So the chances are that a lot of people in hospital have COVID, and if they don't have COVID when they arrive, it's a very good place to catch it.
Yeah.
But is this why they are actually in hospital? Again, these things are never made clear, especially by the BBC. And again, I have to say this twice. The Spectator website has a fascinating article by a pseudonymous BBC journalist who dare not reveal his real name, in which he makes it quite plain exactly how a total bias gripped the corporation right back in the spring of 2020 when all this got going. I have to say 3 weeks to save the NHS is going to become one of those things like it'll be all over by Christmas. It looks to me as if we'll still be saving the NHS in perhaps 2030 at this rate, and with more lockdowns continuing forever. As for the NHS, again, a fascinating article by Dr. Phil Hammond in the Sunday Times yesterday demonstrates just what a threadbare state that organisation is in, and not because of COVID, but because of many, many years of mismanagement and political tug-of-wars, making it almost impossible for anyone to decide how it should work best. So all these things go on and on and on, and we're stuck with this. And the point about Christmas openings of restaurants and pubs is so, and people not going to them, is so important because this is the time of year when those places make most of their profits.
Yeah. And
if they're deprived of it, then I really don't see how many of them can survive much longer. They've kept on and on in the hope that eventually rationality would return, but I don't think it's going to. No. And here we are again, the same old argument. Is this response remotely in proportion to the problem we face? Before anybody says I'm denying the existence of COVID or any such lying rubbish, absolutely not. I'm just saying, have we actually got it right? Have we said this is the correct response? Have we measured it? And also, is it indeed effective? And these things are almost never discussed. And when they are discussed, the people who discuss them are slandered. So here we are in a sort of semi-totalitarian society in which only one view is really allowed currency.
Well, I was talking to somebody this morning about something completely different, but this applies just as easily, I think, to that. It's a bit like arguing with a Labrador. You know, Labradors understand yes and no. They don't really understand anything in between. You know, they either eat the whole chicken or they don't eat any of the chicken. And you can't show them the chicken or else they'll eat the whole thing. You have to hide the chicken, otherwise, you know, they'll want to eat all of it. And we've now seemed to have a government that are either all or nothing. You know, it's either restrictions or no restrictions. And it's like, well, maybe there's something in the between. Maybe there's something you could do which would actually be sensible.
Well, you have to bear in mind here the extraordinary pressure which is on the government. I don't like to show sympathy for governments ever, but look at the supposed opposition. They're fanatically in favour of all this stuff, so much so that last week they passed up an opportunity to actually bring the government down in a parliamentary vote. They thought it was so important to vote for restricting the lives of the people and destroying business that they would do that instead, rather than let the Tories tear themselves to pieces totally in public and actually lose the vote. That is the fascinating thing, that this development in which a health crisis can be used hugely to increase the power of the state over the individual and indeed over the economy, is so appealing to the Blairite left that they would do anything to encourage it. And the small number of people in the Conservative Party who understand what's going on must, I think, be terrified that if things work out badly, if they put one foot wrong, then we could then have a Blairite government enforcing these things, which would mean, if it's possible to imagine, it would be even worse. And it is possible to imagine. You just look at the continental countries, which are run by and large by governments of the statist left, and the amount of restriction over their lives is even greater than it is here, and even more incessant. So it could be worse than it is. And I think we have to recognise that there are elements in this government who've perhaps saved us from some of the worst of it. Not that that's much of a consolation, but remember it could be worse. And remember that this is actually as much about politics as it is about health, if not more so. And there is a new politics abroad of a much, much more powerful and strong and all-embracing state growing among us, which seems to me to be the culmination of the whole Blairite project launched in 1997 of turning this into a different sort of country.
And you've said that repeatedly over the times that you and I have been speaking, and probably for much longer than that before that. And it's a shockingly true statement to make, I'm afraid. But I mean, even you, presumably, Peter, would admit that at this point we all are already ruled by a massively left-wing statist government, because that's what it feels like. Does it feel like we're being run by a Conservative government, even of David Cameron's hue?
But David Cameron was the heir to Blair and openly said so. But it's a process rather than a static position. We're moving in that direction. The Labour Party would like us, and the Scottish nationalists we see would like us to move more rapidly in that direction. And what people then see to realize is how irreversible so much of this is going to be, even if the health crisis ever comes to an end. And I have to say, I begin to doubt it. I mean, there must be an almost endless reserve of variants available. They have to switch to the Cyrillic alphabet next when they've run out of Greek letters.
Yeah.
And then when that's gone, it's by no means impossible that some new virus of some kind arises in some part of the world and becomes another pretext, or indeed reason, if it is a reason, for this sort of activity. Though again, this is the fascinating thing, that the response to this particular problem was unprecedented. No one had ever before resorted to these kind of measures. And you can't have a serious argument with anybody about them. Whenever you raise the point of Sweden and say, well, they didn't actually resort to the punitive and authoritarian measures which we used in this country, people say, oh, well, Sweden had worse results than the countries next door, which is, of course, is entirely irrelevant because those countries are not particularly comparable to Sweden. It's much more comparable to other European countries for various reasons, which Anders Tegnell has stated. And the outcome in Sweden, whatever you may say about it, and they got, as we know, the old people's homes wrong, the care homes wrong, but whatever the outcome in Sweden, it wasn't measurably worse than that in those countries where strict state-imposed shutdowns of life and the economy took place. And therefore, what is the rationality behind this? Is there really a good reason for continuing to pursue these policies, even if the modelling which is used to justify them is correct? Again and again, it doesn't stand up to examination, but nobody's examining it.
Well, that's the trouble. And as it is examined, you know, the answer comes back, well, we're not sure of the data. They don't say, well, the data doesn't actually show that. They just say, we're not sure. So they've now moved the goalpost to such an extent to say that rather than following the science, we're actually leading the science. And we're hoping that when we get to point A, the science will catch up with us and it will say exactly what we thought it would say. But if it doesn't say exactly that, then we'll go somewhere else.
Well, then again, there's also when the what has happened in the past comes to be described, who's in charge of doing the describing and actually setting the arrangements by which the statistics are produced, and is that a wholly impartial process? Yeah. A question worth asking, I would say almost impossible to resolve for reasons which are pretty obvious when you look at it. But on and on it goes, and deeper we get into this mess. And of course, the weaker the economy gets, and the weaker the ability of individuals to support themselves as independent people gets, the stronger the state becomes.
Yeah, and that is, again, where we currently find ourselves. We're told there's a cabinet meeting at 2:00. I can't imagine anything good coming out of that. But, I mean, is it right, do you think, to say that Boris Johnson is now assailed on all sides by those people who might be at least safeguarding some freedoms for us, i.e. a combination of the backbenchers who voted against the latest restrictions, a combination of fear about what happened up in Shropshire North, a combination of the likes of Steve Baker wanting a return to Conservative policies, and people like Lord Frost resigning from the government. I mean, it's a sort of a never-ending roll of shame, basically, now, isn't it, for Boris?
Well, yes, it may be, but if he is chucked out, it'll be for the wrong reasons, I fear. When you look at the Conservative opposition to this, so much of it is shouty and slightly hysterical and not very well informed, that you cringe to look at it and think, well, if this is the best that the opponents of the shutdown policy can come up with in Parliament, no wonder they fail. It doesn't really have any heft. The problem is that people at the centre of politics, the people with both either with the intellect or with the authority or even with the access to the research, they continue to stay out of it. But Johnson will not be removed from the leadership of the Conservative Party for being too Blairite. That's not why he will go. The only reason they get rid of people in the Conservative Party is if they think that those people will not win elections. The problem for the Tory Party is they ceaselessly grope for somebody who will win elections for them, a new Thatcher, and they don't find one. They went through Theresa May, who was a complete disaster. It was a long period saying how wonderful she was, and then they went through Johnson, a long period saying how wonderful he was. And now it looks as if they're going to choose this extraordinary Liz Truss person, again, around whom, again, a strange cult has arisen, people saying she's a new Thatcher. I can't think of anything less likely. And the woman was apparently brought up at Greenham Common, and she was a Liberal Democrat who used to make anti-monarchist speeches. Whatever else she may or may not be, she's not a new Thatcher, and yet they're grasping at this and will doubtless, if they choose her, make a great thing about how wonderful she is, until she turns out not to be. The problem with the Conservative Party is it has no longer got any real reason to exist.
No.
And
but isn't this interesting? Isn't this interesting, Peter? You are now presented with what you are told that you are presented with. You're no longer given a choice as to what you think. You're given a sort of instruction as to what to think. And this is why so-and-so is good and so-and-so is bad.